So really, how hard could it be to get the car to this point, to get it where it's ready for design, ready for paint? Well, you know what? First, let's take a look at some of the things we went through to get to this point. Because remember, she was lawn art. Oh, the pitting was intense. It's absolutely amazing how deep the rust was on this. And of course, there was a lot of grinding, some disassembly, an awful lot of wire wheeling in order to get into all those pits. And look at the Cheeto dust just flying off there and just getting that surface rust off. There was a lot of work to get it to this point. And you can see a few high points that'll need to be knocked in. And we're still not even done. When you look at that front there, there's still a lot to be done. And the pitting, it's amazing the metal's still holding together. So after we sprayed it, I gave her a quick sand, just a light sand, just to reveal those high points again. And you can see it takes barely any sanding to see just exactly where you're a little bit too high in the hood. So all that's going to need to be knocked down, and those two holes where the bell were, we're going to need to fill that as well. So it's time to go to the body shop and take out our hammer and dolly. We're going to push up against those low points and kind of tap down the high points in order to give ourselves a closer to true surface in which to work with. So it takes a little bit of work. We're just, you see there, just tapping gently, just trying to get those proud points down and smooth, or at least closer to what we're looking for. And we did a little bit back in the seat area. Now I don't want to fill that in with any sort of filler because there is a contour, there is a certain amount of grain there. And of course in the front, where at one point it had probably hit a fence post or something like that, we beat that out as best we could. And the Bondo I'm using isn't a normal Bondo. This actually has fiberglass strand in it. And the reason why I'm going with this can cover a hole up to a 1/2 inch in diameter. And I have 2 1/4-inch holes on the hood. So we just give the single stripe. And when I was a kid, when I used to do body work, I would kind of stir my filler, and that is not the way to do it. Of course, you want to kind of knead it in the way you would a pastry or something like that, just folding it over and over and over. When you stir it, you tend to get air bubbles, and those air bubbles, when you sand, you will still have little tiny holes, and it's kind of difficult to fill those in. You would figure that would be an easy thing to do, but it just never accepts it quite right. So now we're going to speed this up a little bit. This isn't double time, just giving a quick layer over everything, and at the same time, we're filling in those holes. So this should give us, actually ended up giving us a smoother surface, something to work with, and at the same time, you see I'm going over it multiple times. It's better to give yourself a second layer than to go too deep with the body filler, especially one that has fiberglass in it, because the sanding is brutal with this material. So what I'm doing right here, I'm just putting a little bit more time into getting everything as smooth and as nice as I can. I'd rather put the time in now than to take the additional time later to sand, because it really is hard with regular filler, and it's even worse with this. So right now I'm just lifting up the front of it. I know it's out of camera view predominantly. I'm just hitting that little bumper area where it ended up knocking into a fence post or something like that, just to straighten that out a bit. We tapped it out a little bit with the hammer and dolly, but this will clean it up just a little more. All right, and here I'm starting off with a small block with an 80 grit paper, and I might have been able to go a little bit more aggressive because this material is so difficult to sand, but I'm more comfortable with an 80 grit. And you see, I like feeling the material a lot as I'm working. You find sometimes in different lights, sometimes things just aren't as evident. Sometimes you don't notice that rough edge or notice that you're dipping a little bit too much or that perhaps you need to take more material off. So I like to use my hands a lot just to dust off the surface, and at the same time, I like feeling to see where I'm at. And of course, if you remember the objective of this of my channel is to take something that was basically lost, that was going to end up being discarded at some point, to repair it, and then to trade up once I get it in better shape, once I make it more desirable. So the goal with this car is to bring it back to life and then eventually trade up until I end up with an actual vehicle. So we'll see how this goes. Right now you can see I'm throwing a second layer of that Bondo on, and I kind of wish I went with a more lightweight Bondo for the subsequent layers, because it is really hard to sand, but it's neither here nor there. That's just the route I went. So here I'm using Bondo's glazing and spot putty, and this material dries relatively quickly. Within 30 minutes you're able to sand it, and I like to press it in nice and tight, and it kind of seats it on all of those little pock marks, on all those little rust imperfections. This isn't meant for anything major, if you had a major ding or anything like that. It's just to really either feather out your regular Bondo, to fill the scratches in from your Bondo, but in this case it works really well in filling all of those tiny little pits that you see here. And being that this car was entirely rusted, the majority of the car needs to be covered. And we've sped it up here because your time is valuable and you don't want to see the actual amount of time that went into doing this. Now you will notice that I don't hit the seating area because the seating area has its own texture stamped into it. And if I were to have used this, I would lose that texture. So I in no way, shape, or form claim to be a auto body professional, so please let me know how you would do it, how you would do things differently. Leave some notes in the comments. I'd appreciate it. So here we are, the entire body has pretty much been coated with that glazing putty. And you see our hood has that second layer of that Bondo on it. And you'll see when we get up close, you can actually see all the pitting, all those red spots, the black sticking out. And where I'm pointing right here, a couple little spot welds. So we're going to be able to eliminate those too by using that glazing putty. So as you can see, a lot of time went into just putting one layer over this car, but I'm sure it's going to be worth it in the end. So this glaze is really a lightweight kind of material, so what I'm using here is like a 220, 240 grit, and it takes it down relatively quick. So where you see the red, that's where it's filled in, those minor imperfections, those pock marks, those divots, and of course there are a little bit of irregularities in the metal that we were able to smooth out. And once again, I sprayed it, and I just found a few areas that just kind of stuck up a little bit. And there we go, we're going right back with that glaze putty in order to fill things in. And And unfortunately, they claim that the glaze putty does not shrink, but it did a little bit, so it required an entire coat over the entire vehicle in order to get rid of all those pits, as they were still protruding a little bit. And of course, the hood, being that we Bondoed it, needed quite a bit of additional work to get her to smooth out. So once again, you see we are back sanding again. So once again, we went, sprayed the entire car, and somehow that ends up bringing out some of those flaws, which is good. You want to take care of them before you get to your final paint. So predominantly, we see some errors on the hood that need to be fixed, and right in that front where it had hit a fence post or something along those lines. So you see the majority of the putty is across the face and the hood. We're seeing a lot less on the rest of the body. We're getting closer. And this is kind of like lather, rinse, and repeat. We're sanding again. And after quite some time, we're sprayed, and there's still some errors in there. Still some little things that can be improved, a little bit more putty. And then we touched up our putty, and we're sanding again. This kind of reminds you like when you're in one of those family trips and the kids want to sing 100 bottles of beer on the wall. And by the time you get to Maryland, you think you're going to lose your mind. And that's kind of what this is like. But the proof is in the pudding. There was a saying with Breakstone's cream cheese, if Sam Breakstone hadn't been so picky, his cottage cheese wouldn't have been so good. So here we go. We are just sanding and sanding non-stop. And a lot of this has been cut out. And you see there's some more touch-up. We're doing more paste. It's just, once again, just going over and over. And I probably should have gone a little thicker, but tell me how you do it. Let me know, because I'm always open to hearing suggestions on how you might make it a little quicker. So of course we're giving ourselves a good spray, and here we go with the final product, and it is ready for design. So if you have any suggestions, I think I see a racing stripe running down the center of this, but I don't know. Let me know. So please like and subscribe, and thanks for stopping in.